Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Xizhi. Coming up in this edition, Russia and Ukraine have intensified attacks on one another ahead of a new round of peace talks in Istanbul. The Gaza Health Ministry has reported over 30 deaths near a food aid site. And a suspect is in custody after an attack in Boulder, Colorado left several injured. The FBI is investigating the incident as an act of terrorism. We begin with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Moscow and Kyiv sent delegations to Istanbul for a new round of peace talks on Monday, following intensified attacks on one another over the weekend. Presidential aide Vladimir Zelensky is leading the Russian delegation. He also represented Moscow at the talks in May. Defense Minister Rustem Umerov is heading the Ukrainian delegation. An earlier round of talks last month failed to bring about any significant outcome apart from a prisoner exchange. On Sunday, the Russian Defense Ministry confirmed that Ukraine launched drone strikes on military airfields in 5 regions, including a base in Siberia. Ukraine called it its longest-range strike to date, involving over 100 drones. It claimed 41 Russian military aircraft were damaged. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Air Force reported that Russia launched more than 470 drones and fired 7 missiles across Ukraine in retaliation. Audrey McAlpine reports from Kyiv.
It's known as Operation Spiderweb, this operation that took place targeting those 4 military targets in Russia. And it is probably the most significant drone attack by Ukraine in the past 3 years. Of course, it took out major fighter jets and also reached far-flung regions of Russia up in the Arctic Circle as well as in parts of Siberia, and bringing it to question again of the range and the sophistication that Ukraine is able to carry out these attacks in Russia. The delegation will be led by the defense minister, Umerov, and Zelensky made a post on X saying that the priorities would, of course, be for this unconditional ceasefire, but also for a prisoner exchange and as well for the return of what he called abducted children. Now, he also said that they would discuss this long-lasting peace. But again, in light of these attacks, it's hard to say what the result of these talks will be.
That is Audrey McAlpine reporting. Turning to the Middle East, the Gaza Health Ministry says over 30 Palestinians were killed and nearly 170 injured near a food distribution site in southern Gaza on Sunday. Witnesses say Israeli soldiers opened fire on people gathering for aid, though Israel has denied these claims. The International Committee of the Red Cross said its field hospital in Rafah received nearly 180 casualties. In contrast, a video released by the US and Israel-based Gaza Humanitarian Foundation showed no deaths or injuries at the actual distribution point. Hamas has confirmed it is ready to begin indirect ceasefire talks with Israel. So far, Israel has not responded. Rami Amagari reports from Gaza.
In the central Gaza Strip town of Nusayrat and al-Barej, actually near the Netzarim junction, where there is a distribution center that is run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, there was 1 person killed and others injured as people approached the area to get the supplies they have been promised to get by that institution. Israeli army is there now in the Don and Rafah city. There was a very deadly shootout by the Israeli army that claimed the lives of about 40 Palestinians. 40 Palestinians were supposed to be hungry, to be starving out of the lack of supplies, lack of commodities, goods in the territory. It's expected that in the upcoming days there is some kind of expectation that there will be some more truckloads entering the territory. But the situation on the ground is already tense, with Israeli army actions continue unabated in all over parts of the territory, with Israeli army increasing or actually stepping up its actions in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip.
That was Rami Amagari in Gaza. In Europe, Conservative candidate Karol Nawrocki has narrowly won Poland's presidential runoff election held over the weekend. Nawrocki secured just over 50% of the vote, narrowly defeating Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski. Nawrocki will succeed President Andrzej Duda, also a conservative, whose second and final term concludes on August 6th. According to the Polish constitution, the president serves a 5-year term and may be re-elected once. Meanwhile, in Asia, South Korean voters are heading to the polls to elect a new leader following the impeachment and removal of former President Yoon Suk-yeol. Yoon's brief declaration of martial law in December plunged the country into political turmoil. Xinhan has more on the top contenders for the presidency.
In the wake of former President Yoon Suk-yeol's ousting over an illegal martial law declaration, South Korea faces a snap presidential election. The current favorite, based on polling, is liberal progressive candidate Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party. A former factory worker turned human rights lawyer, Mr. Lee has held positions as mayor and governor in major jurisdictions and hopes to take his experience to the office of the presidency. His campaign stresses democratic restoration and economic revival and proposes constitutional reforms to diversify power consolidated in the executive branch.
He is known as a reformist politician, and he does put things in action, whether people agree with his agenda or not. But what is clear about him, regarding his reputation, is that he does things.
Lee's main contender is Kim Moon-soo of the People Power Party. Mr. Kim is a former labor activist who served as Minister of Employment and Labor in the previous administration. He advocates for economic revitalization and a conservative stance on diplomacy and regional security. Analysts say Mr. Kim's main challenge will be distancing himself from former President Yoon while trying to hold on to a divided conservative base.
His strategy would be to consolidate the support from the conservative camp. So he tries to emphasize his conservative, stance on these major issues, including the Korea's relationship with the United States, China, and North Korea, of course.
The wild card this election is Lee Jun-suk of the New Reform Party, a Harvard-educated conservative and former leader of the PPP. At 40 years old, he represents a youthful push for political innovation and digital transformation. He's vowed to finish the race and resisted calls to form a conservative alliance.
By sticking to his principal positions and by maintaining the image that he wouldn't be bought so easily, he is a man of character and he's a political leader of principles, would be tremendously more beneficial to Lee Jun-suk as a new hope for conservative supporters in Korean politics.
South Korea is still reeling in the aftermath of an illegal martial law bid and presidential impeachment amid a vastly polarized nation based on political ideologies. Whoever wins this election has the daunting task of steering the nation's path forward at an important juncture as it faces both challenges within and uncertainties abroad.
That was Xinhan reporting in Seoul. Finally, in North America, at least 6 people have been injured after a man threw incendiary devices into a pro-Israel demonstration in Colorado. The suspect was heard chanting "Free Palestine" at a scene in Boulder. He's now in custody. The FBI is investigating the attack as an act of terrorism. The incident happened less than 2 weeks after a fatal shooting of 2 Israeli embassy employees in Washington. It is Tianshan has more.
Latest briefing by the Boulder County Police Department in which they summarized the incident. This incident happened in an outdoors shopping mall, the Pearl Street shopping mall, in a crowded, busy time of the day on Sunday afternoon. The attack came in the form of a Molotov cocktail attack in a crowd of people, including a group of people who were demonstrating at the time. This was a group that apparently regularly goes to that specific area at this time of the week on Sunday afternoons to demonstrate about the Israeli hostages that are currently being kept in Gaza. And they are defined as anywhere from minor to severe injuries. All of them are burnt injuries, and they were triaged to different hospitals. At the time, we understand at least 2 of them were airlifted. Those were obviously the heavier injuries, and the police just confirmed that at least one of those people are in critical condition. The name of the suspect they have in custody, the police department said was Mohammed Suleiman. And they've also said that currently they believe that this was a lone attack. They believe this is the only suspect for this attack that they currently have in custody. They were not making any conclusions yet. Now, we've heard from FBI, however, they've already defined this as a targeted terror attack. For now, there seems to be a different picture being painted, with the police not speaking about the motive yet, but the FBI already calling it a targeted terror attack.
That was Edis Tianshan reporting. Staying in the US, a new COVID-19 variant, potentially more transmissible than the previous global strain, is spreading. It comes just as the Trump administration is cutting public health staffing and limiting recommendations on who should receive COVID vaccines. Jim Spellman has more from Bethesda, Maryland.
The new COVID-19 variant known as NB1.8.1 has been detected in the United States after spreading in more than 20 other countries over the last several months. The new variant arrives amid fears the Trump administration has weakened the country's ability to deal with a COVID surge. Even before NB1.8.1's arrival, hundreds of people have been dying from COVID in the U.S. each week. A winter spike saw weekly deaths top 1,000 in January. Experts say immunity in the U.S. is waning and vaccine rates are low, with less than a quarter of adults having received updated booster shots by the end of April. And last week, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. announced new limits on who will be recommended to receive the vaccine.
I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule.
Kennedy has been skeptical about immunizations and made claims about vaccine safety that most experts say are not based in facts.
You have right now the head of Health and Human Services, who for 20 years has been an anti-vaccine activist, science denialist, and conspiracy theorist.
The new COVID concerns come as the World Health Organization has finalized a landmark treaty meant to better coordinate global pandemic preparation and response.
Importantly, this is not just about reacting to disease outbreaks or confirmed pandemics. It's about international cooperation for prevention, preparedness, and response so that when outbreaks happen, they can be stopped.
But President Donald Trump removed the United States from the World Health Organization and will not participate in the new treaty. Critics of the Trump administration fear mass firings of public health staff here at the National Institutes of Health and other agencies, plus anticipated budget cuts, will make the U.S. far less capable of dealing with public health emergencies like a surge in COVID cases or a new pandemic.
That was Jim Spellman reporting. Now recapping the headlines, Russia and Ukraine have intensified attacks on one another ahead of a new round of peace talks in Istanbul. The Gaza Health Ministry has reported over 30 deaths near a food distribution site. And a suspect is in custody after an attack in Boulder, Colorado, left several injured. The FBI is investigating the incident as an act of terrorism. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to The Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news and magazine program. We would welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.